In biblical times, in the Middle East, it was the bridegroom's job to set up all the things for the wedding. Right? It wasn't the bride's job, it wasn't the bride's family's job, it wasn't the groom's family job, it was the groom's job to set up everything that this wedding would need, whatever that happens to be. And a wedding would last a week. It would be a week-long festival, a big old party. And this guy who had this wine, he was supposed to have this party for a whole week, he ran out. And he ran out of wine, and the reason he ran out of wine is it's the same old story that's been told 1,000 times. He has these frat buddies, and they came over, and they drank it. They started doing like wine pong and doing stone jar stands, and soon enough, he's embarrassed because he runs out of the wine. Right? He has nothing to give everybody, and he thought he prepared everything, but you know what? It didn't work out as he had planned. It would be as if the wise men who had come all that distance to see baby Jesus, all the wise men came this distance, and they wanted to see the baby, but the baby hadn't been born yet, and everybody expected the baby to be born yet, but Joseph said, well, no, the baby's not born yet, and he didn't know what to do, and he gave her spicy wings, and he doesn't even know where to find castor oil, and he made her bounce on the ball, and the wise men are expecting him to say something, and he didn't know what to say, and he's not prepared. It'd be like that. And in the midst of all of that embarrassment and lack of preparation, there's this miracle that happens. Jesus steps into the midst of all of this, and he does what he does. Jesus, he steps in and he says, hey, look, I'm going to take over. I'm going to solve this problem. You're supposed to have this party. It's supposed to be a week long. There's 180 gallons worth of water that we can turn into wine, and he does it, just like that. He takes over the situation, and he helps, and the party can go on because of that, right? I want to take a second here, and I want to kind of spin around and backtrack and talk a little bit about alcohol, because the reality is that some of our more fundamental brothers and sisters don't imbibe in alcohol, and I want to be very clear and let everybody know that that is a good and acceptable thing. The idea that I'm talking about drinking wine or something like that in no way takes away from what our brothers and sisters in the faith believe. What they believe is that alcohol can bring temptation into your life, and rather than allow that temptation to come into your life, just remove it from your life, and you won't have any of those problems that come along with it. And there is a lot of goodness and wisdom that comes along with that. So I don't want you to hear me saying that we shouldn't have alcohol. And I don't want you to hear me say the other thing, right? That, hey, we should have like keggers always. Or we should just, have flowing fountains of wine every church service. I don't want to say that either. I want to talk about the middle way, about moderation for a second. I think so often, so many people think that church should be sad or serious and just constantly, and it doesn't need to be that way. You can have joy in your life. You can have joy in your church. If you have it in your life, you should have it in your church. Church should reflect your life, and your life should reflect church. That's what we call authenticity. And the thing is, the most amazing thing to me here is that the first miracle that Jesus ever performed was this miracle of keeping the party going. Did you read that? Did you read that? Did you catch that? That the reason Jesus was performing this miracle is because they drank all of the wine. They needed more. Jesus turned water into wine, not so they could have wine, so they could have more wine. They had already drank it all. He wanted to keep the party going because life is supposed to be enjoyed. And somehow we can get all caught up in, our work or all this seriousness. And somehow we think that Jesus isn't supposed to laugh with us or doesn't like it when we laugh. And I want you to pay attention. That's exactly the opposite of what we are called to do. In fact, did you notice what we're called to do is to live the life? And of all the things that we take for granted, life is the number one thing. Life is the thing that we always take for granted. We just assume that we're going to have more life. We just assume that there's going to be another day. We just assume that I'm going to take care of this whatever next week, next month, next year. We kick these things down the road. And if you've ever had somebody close to you die, then you know immediately how true it is that life should not be taken for granted. But how long until we just take for granted our life again? We just expect that we're alive. We just expect that, of course, we're going to be here. And of all the people, Mary had to remind Jesus of that fact. Right? Jesus was so caught up in what he was meant to do in this world. When his mother came up to him and she said, "Hey, Jesus, they need some wine," his response was, "Woman?" Now, who talked to their mother like that? Nobody says that to their mother. "Woman, what is that to do with me?" Right? Because Jesus, we forget that Jesus is a man too. Jesus is caught up in what his job is. What is his job? His job is to find that cross, to mount that cross, and to die for our sins. And he's so caught up in that, he can't have fun. Even Jesus has to be reminded to enjoy life. And Mary comes up to him and she says, "Jesus, we need some wine." And then you know what happens next? She leaves. She doesn't say, "Jesus, we need wine. Here's what I want you to do for me." She doesn't say, "Jesus, we need wine," and she waits for him to do it. She didn't say, "Jesus, we need wine," and then she instructs him every little bit. She says, "Jesus, we need wine," and she walks away, and she just understands it's going to be taken care of. I think there's a lesson in there for us. How often we say, "Jesus, I need, and would you mind doing this and this and this so that I can get to that thing that I need?" Instead of just saying, "Hey, Jesus, here's the problem," and then waiting for Jesus to answer. So Mary comes up to Jesus. Mary has to remind Jesus, "Hey, there's some life to be had here. This party's not over yet. Let's enjoy it." And then Jesus goes to work. And how does he work? He didn't say, "Hocus pocus, alakazoo," and then just, make wine jugs appear. No, he says, "I need some servants." He says, "I need some people who will serve me. Let me have those people." And he does. And he calls on his servants. And he says, "Now go and get me some water." And what do? They have these big stone jars and they fill them up. If you do the math, there's about 180 gallons worth of water that they have to fill up. There is no running taps. There is no hose. These people had to take buckets. They had to walk down to the watering whatever, the river or wherever they were. And they had to haul them back up like a gallon, maybe a half gallon at a time. And they didn't have perfectly sealed jars. I mean, water's pouring all over. They're pouring sweat. These servants worked for this water. And they filled up these jugs. And as soon as they filled up the jugs, they scooped some of it out, and it happened. There was no big miracle. There was no big shock of light. It just happened. The servants worked for Jesus, and the miracle happened through them. How often do we think, "Oh, I can't do that. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not able to do that"? How much better would it be if we just did whatever Jesus asked of us to do and then we expected the miracle to happen, knowing that we were the miracle, we were the ones making it happen, that we were the way that Jesus worked in the world. These servants served Jesus, all except for one thing. And you ever done this? You ever get into a Bible study? I know some of us are in the Bible study now. Or you ever read the Bible with a group of people and you read something and you catch it and then you see, there's this deeper meaning. There's this deeper thing. Well, that's kind of, what I'm doing now. But when I read this, there's this thing that just punches my nose. It makes me pay attention every time I read it. And I just think, what is going on here? And I read this and I can't understand. These servants who see the miracle, they're the only ones who see the miracle. They get to be a part of Jesus working in the world. They bring this wine to the steward. The steward says, "What is this? I mean, this is really good wine." Right? The groom, he tried to provide for his friends and his family. He made some preparations, right? He brought in some wine so everything would be okay, and the wine was okay. And then Jesus comes in, and what has happened? Jesus provides better than this groom could have ever provided. How often do we think, "Hey, I'm going to be the one to provide. I'm going to be the one to take care of things"? Well, this story shows us, you can do so much, but when Jesus gets involved, it goes even better. But that's not the thing that bobs me in the nose. The thing that keeps me up at night is the servants, when they talk to the steward, and the steward said, where did this come from? And the grooms, the bridegroom said, what's going on here? The servants never said a word. How could they see the miracle, have been working so hard for the miracle, and then when it happened, just, giggle to themselves? How do you do that? How do you not just tell the whole world, holy moly, I just saw something miracle happen? How do you not just go, oh my goodness, how can you just be quiet about that? Had they done that, had they been authentic, had they been a part of being a servant and then expressed that to people at the party, all of those people would have been flabbergasted. Everybody in that party would have followed Jesus, but instead it was the servants and the ones who were already following Jesus who knew who he was. How is it that these people who've served Jesus, who've seen the miracles of Jesus in their life, who have tasted it, all of a sudden are quiet about what happened in their life? How can that be? How can that be? How can we just keep that to ourselves? We know that the metaphor is supposed to be like this, right? The party is life. And we're all those guests at that party. And there's lots of other parables that Jesus talks about that are much, much even closer to this understanding. But if we understand that life is a party, there's a few things that can happen at this party. You can get drunk and wasted, and you cannot pay attention to anything except for yourself. And then in the end, what do you get? A big hangover. Nobody wants that. Or you can go to the party and not have any fun either. Nobody wants that. Moderation in the middle way is the way to go. Enjoy the gift. Don't get so drunk that by the time Jesus comes around with his awesome wine, you don't understand that it's awesome. Don't get so lost in your party that you can't understand that life and the party is not the biggest part of the party, that there is still goodness yet to come in the end. Even life can be abused, just like alcohol can be abused. We can get lost in our own hedonistic desires, doing what we want, and we cannot pay attention to Jesus. Of course, if we do that, then we don't get to be a part of the miracle. If we pay attention to Jesus, we get to be a part of the miracle. We get to be a part of the miracle. That's an odd thing for a lot of people to think about, that being a servant and doing the work of Jesus and all these things that the world says is boring, all of a sudden becomes the very thing that the world would want. That's who our Lord is. He says, if you follow me, if you do what I say, not only will you have life, you will have it abundantly, now and forever. In this life and the next life. Life is so good now, I can make it even better. And that is not the end. Death is not the end. And so when you say, oh, I take life for granted, do you take your afterlife for granted too? Have you been lost in the mix, or are you ready to be a servant, to follow Jesus? And so this is what I want you to take away.